Well, good day, everybody. This is Joe. Welcome back. Well, today we have a little photography project. I've been interested for a long time in square format images, and I never really understood why. Perhaps it's the symmetry, right, of the horizontals and the verticals are all the same, and there's no preferential horizon. I've always liked square format, but in the last few years, I've started to notice, as I studied more about the history of photography, I've started to see some round images. So you go back into a little bit of photography history. I think it was the very first Kodak Brownie box camera that came out in the late 19th century. It was loaded with, I think it was a 5-inch wide roll of photographic paper. So they were using like kind of paper negative kind of technology, but anyway, it shot round images, right? And you would send the camera to Kodak. They would take the paper out, develop it, make prints, and then send the camera back to you with the prints with a fresh roll of paper loaded in it. That was, I think, the first commercial camera that Kodak had using round images. So I think there's a similarity between square format and round format, and maybe that's why I like both formats. There's a symmetry to it, but with round format, what's interesting, there's no corners. There's also no straight edges, so there's no preferential vertical versus horizontal at all. And I don't know, it interests me. Maybe it sort of resembles your central zone of vision, the sharp zone of vision, kind of circular, I don't know. So recently I've noticed on the Facebook group that's called Experimenting with Photographic Paper as Film, that particular group, there's an artist, Diana Pankova, and this particular image I'll show you is a wonderful round image, wide angle pinhole from a paper negative. I love this kind of stuff, and I'm really interested in making a camera that can do this. So I've created a lot of pinhole cameras over the years. I have a huge assortment of them. Most of them I'm not using right now. You know, I really don't need to make another pinhole camera, but I really need to make a round format pinhole camera, and that's what I'm going to do. I think this cigar box will hopefully work for me. So without any further ado, let's get on with the project, shall we? Okay, so the interior dimensions of this box, so the width of it is about 6 3/8 interior dimension. The height internally is about 6 1/8. And then when you close the lid down, there's about a 1/4 inch of space between the inside of the lid and the top of the flange here. And so the total height, it really amounts to about 2.5 inches approximately that you have from here up to about a 1/4 inch above this lip here. My plan is actually not to disturb the artwork on the top of the lid here. I'm actually going to put the pinhole aperture. I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom of this box. I'm going to put a thin piece of brass on the inside for a pinhole, and then I'd like to have a pull shutter, a brass rod that goes through the side of the box that pulls and it slides a shutter open internally. And then my plan is to have an insert made of cardboard that fits into the box that holds the paper negative in a certain distance, about 2 inches roughly above the pinhole, and also gives you a storage compartment for storing more black and white paper. So I have some sketches here. Okay, so starting off here, this is again the rough dimensions, interior dimensions of the box. I'd like to use 8 by 10 inch photo paper, and to be economical about it, I want to cut them into 5-inch squares. So I can get 2 5-inch squares of paper from one 8 by 10 photo paper sheet, and I'll have a strip 3 inches by 10 inches of paper that I'm going to just save for some other purpose. So that's what I'm going to do. But of course, the interior dimensions being a little bit bigger than 6 inches, it means I'm going to have some extra space in here because the paper itself would be 5 inches, and I'm thinking I'm going to make the actual circular image about 4 3/4 inches in diameter. That gives me about 1/8 of an inch on the edge of the 5-inch square paper for being able to handle it, and you don't want the image falling off the corner of the paper, of the edge of the paper. So as far as angle of view, if you have a 4 3/4 inch diameter circular image, I'm thinking about a 2-inch focal length will give me a nice wide field of view. And of course that 2 inches is going to be able to fit in the box here, I think, because what I'm planning on doing is making an inner liner of cardboard here, and one side of the box will be open, and this side will have there's two little pieces of cardboard with a gap between them, and that's where the photo paper is inserted. The back piece of cardboard has the circular 4 3/4 inch mask cut in it, and then this rear baffle or piece of cardboard divides the film plane and the storage compartment. So there's a storage compartment that'll be about a 1/2 inch wide behind the film plane where I can store more photo paper, and I'll be able to change the camera, change the film out in the field using a changing bag. So here's kind of a side view of it again. My initial plan was to use some black foam core board for the outer structure, but I think I'm just going to try with this thinner cardboard at first and see how it works. So again, here's the two pieces of cardboard with the gap between them where the paper is slipped in. I'm going to have to build these spacers around here because, again, the dimensions of the interior dimensions of the box is 6 3/8 and 6 1/8, and I only need a 5-inch gap in here. So I'm going to have these little spacers. Enables me to slip the paper in there. It'll center it nicely on the pinhole. And the idea is this whole cardboard insert will be once you put the camera in the changing bag, you open the lid of the box, you'll be able to pull that whole cardboard insert out and then pull out the paper, stick it in the storage compartment, get another sheet of paper, slip it back in the gap there in the film plane, and reinsert the cardboard insert. Okay, pertaining to this idea of using a cardboard insert in a camera and a storage compartment, well, so this is the 12 Days of Christmas pinhole camera, and it just has a simple rotating shutter up here on the lid for the pinhole. But pulling off the lid, and of course this is cardboard, right, this camera, but I've painted the lid with some black paint, and I've lined the edge with gaffer's tapes, so it's kind of a light trap. But what I did is I made a black paper insert just like that, and so it's a square format camera. It's like what, 5 inches square. The paper goes in the bottom of the box there and just held in place by a couple loops of painter's masking tape. But this baffle, this insert, acts like a light trap. So any light that escapes into the camera around the lid has to go all the way down and back through the bottom side to get to the film. So it's sort of an extra measure of ensuring that the camera doesn't have any light leaks. And of course the bottom of this baffle has a square hole for the pinhole aperture here. So that's one way you can use these cardboard baffles or inserts. This one is a cigar box that has a sliding lid, and the lid slides open like that, and I had made some like baffles that are taped on here and there's some baffles taped around the opening side of the lid that sort of produces a light trap effect, right? So it seals up around there when it's closed. But what I did with this camera, it has a storage compartment back here. So the pinhole is here, a little pinhole shutter that pivots. There's a little screw eye that keeps the shutter from falling down any further. This is just a piece of masonite with some black felt on it and a little wooden knob glued on. Anyway, so this is the camera chamber itself. There are two little slots here, two little pieces of metal that the paper slips into to hold it in place. But this back here is a storage compartment, and what I have is a movable divider. And this divider, you basically can put your exposed paper behind the divider, and then your unexposed paper is in front of the divider, so you have multiple shots. And this will hold probably about a 1/2 inch thick stack of photo paper, which is probably over 50 sheets of paper, right? So you could go out on a vacation, on holiday, on a road trip with this kind of a camera and have plenty of capacity for shooting. So that's just two ideas for how these inserts work and for storage compartments. And you, of course, change out the paper in a changing bag between every shot. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of the bottom of the box. I'm going to drill a pilot hole, and then using a Forstner bit, I'm going to drill a larger round hole in here that'll be hopefully large enough to accommodate the wide angle view of the camera. The base of this camera is really only about 1/8 of an inch thick approximately, so the hole won't need to be super large to get a wide angle. Then I'm going to have to get some wooden pieces, some strips of wood together to make this frame for the pull shutter, and a brass rod that goes out the side that you can pull the shutter open and close. So if you look at the box, it has a jewelry clasp on this side, it has the hinges on this side, and so when you hold the camera up in the shooting position like this, you're either going to be using this side as the bottom or this side as the bottom, and I think it's because this has a nice colorful label on it, I'm going to use this side as the bottom, so I'm going to have to put the pull shutter on this face. The pull shutter will come up here. It'll be a little opening with a brass tube and right above the wall of the floor of the camera here. And of course the pinhole opening will be right in the base of the camera here. Okay, I think I have a mechanical pencil. Alright, we'll find the center of this box, or the base of it. Approximately. Doesn't have to be exact. Alright. Well, okay, I'm going to put a pilot drill bit, a little 1/16 inch drill bit in here. Now we have to get a Forstner bit. I'm thinking that this 1/2 inch will work. Nice clean hole, 1/2 inch diameter. And the nice thing is, the wood isn't blown out by drilling it from both sides. So I have this little brass tube, and I had cut it with a tubing cutter, so I need to clean up the hole. But basically I have this brass rod, and the tube and the rod nest together very snugly. The rod can slide in the tube and virtually no light can get through there. So that's going to be my light trap for the push rod that opens and closes the shutter. I just need to cut this to the proper length and then trim off and clean up the end like I've done right here. Okay, so I've measured the thickness this little tube has to go through the sidewall, and it's about 3/8 of an inch, it looks like. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than 3/8 because I can always file it down if I need to. So now I definitely have to clean up the hole for this with this triangular file and try to file down the burrs. There's my little sleeve that's going to go in the camera. So this little sleeve is about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, outside diameter, so I'm going to put 1/8 of an inch hole in this side here where I want the shutter to come up. And so it's going to be basically midway. Just measure this. And given the thickness of this wood, you can kind of see the lamination there on the bottom. It kind of helps me to position where the shutter is going to be, like right there. And I'm going to put a little starting dimple so the drill bit won't dance around, like that. See if it fits in there. Oh, looks like it does. Wow, nice and snug. So it looks like the tube will go right in like that. The maximum length that this rod needs to be, as I figure the rod will be close to the middle of the shutter hole, and I have about a 3/8 of an inch sticking out the top of the camera that gives me enough room to, if you can see it there, to solder something onto it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this right there. See if it goes through the hole here. Yes, it does. Nice. Okay, Okay, I've cleaned off this piece of brass, taken the tape off, cleaned it with some alcohol, and so the corners are a little kind of bent a little bit, so I'm going to kind of round these corners just a little bit. I'm going to kind of cut a little bit of, like about a 1/8 inch off roughly, all 4 corners with a pair of Cutco knives, right? And then I'm going to have to round off the cuts with a flat file here. Well, there it is, nicely rounded corners, and so my little brass tube, I'm going to be soldering it something like that so it pulls up. So I'm roughing up the brass with a wire steel brush so the solder will stick a little better to this. I'm going to put some liquid solder flux on both sides of the tube, like this. And, okay. All right. Let's see here. Yes, it's hot. Let's see about this. Let's see if I can get this side over here. That looks pretty good. Not perfect, but hey, it'll hold. Yeah. All right, so the hole for the rod is up here. This is, I'm just test fitting some strips of this thin cardboard. Kind of, sort of. All right. Those two should fit like this, and then I just need 2 more pieces to bridge between them. Okay, so I have some of my pieces of cardboard taped down as a reference so they won't slip, and yeah, I probably should be using wood glue, but I've decided that this will be quicker for the sake of expediency. This is high temperature hot glue gun, so we'll see about this. Yeah, should be using wood glue, but hey, this is for the sake of getting this project done today. And then I want to space this guy so that it has the same amount of gap, roughly. Something like that. Doesn't have to be exact, right? This is all, that's the thing about pinhole photography, is it doesn't have to be exact. So now I have this recessed rectangular area that I can put my brass pinhole in and tape it down with some gaffer's tape, and then my shutter will go over it like that, and of course I'm going to paint everything black, and I'm putting some hot glue gun fillet in the corners because these cigar boxes aren't built exactly perfectly tight. Once that dries, I hope to be able to paint it black like all the other surfaces will be, and while I'm at it I might as well do the vertical so it'll take paint also. So now we're at the point where we have to kind of decide on the focal length of the camera. It's going to have a really wide angle of view. I want it to have some light fall off in the corners, so I'm thinking about a 2-inch focal length roughly. And so the problem is, with a 2-inch focal length and a super wide angle of view, you have to decide on what's the optimal focal ratio. What's the optimal size pinhole? 2 inches. So I have Eric Renner's classic book on pinhole photography. I bought this back in 1995 when it came out, and in this book, of course, there's a chart of optimal pinhole sizes. There are pinhole calculators online and you can use those, but let's say 60 millimeters. I'll make it a little bit longer than the middle to optimize it just for a little bit of off axis. So 60 millimeters, the optimal size pinhole is 0.28 millimeters, so it's just under 1/3 of a millimeter. So we're going to have to figure out how to make a pinhole that's about 1/3 of a millimeter. Okay, so I'm using this 2 mil that's 0.002 inch thick sheet brass. It comes in this roll. I bought this 20 years ago, and I'm getting low on the stock of it because all I've used it for basically is pinhole cameras. So it looks to me like a 3/4 inch size square approximately is going to work pretty good in here. It'll enable me to get it put in place in the middle of the circle and have enough room around the edge for gaffer's tape to tape it in place. So what I'm going to do is put the needle onto the brass, hold it and kind of rotate it slowly to barely make a dimple on the other side. And I have a piece of soft cardboard behind it here. Now we're going to sand it with a figure 8 pattern on some 600 grit emery. Figure 8 pattern ensures that you have a even sanding pattern. And then what you want to do is very carefully just touch the needle to the hole. Don't apply much pressure, but this will clean out any of the burrs. Okay, so now to measure the size of it, I'm going to put it up against the back of a millimeter scale with the pinhole partly protruding above the scale and one edge of the pinhole even with one of the marks on the scale. And then you can estimate how many diameters does it take to go across from the left side of one line to the left side of the next line. And it looks like 3 of them will fit in there. So I'm about 0.33. Probably slightly bigger than I need to be, but that's fine. So I'm going to get tape on it on one edge. And now what I want to do is on the other side of the pinhole, on the other side of the box, I want to try to center the hole so the pinhole is centered pretty much in the hole, aperture hole here, which looks pretty close right there. Then I'll just get my next piece of tape and put it on the other side. And repeat it with the other 2 edges. And there is the pinhole taped in place on all 4 sides. Inside this little recess of the cardboard, the pinhole is pretty nicely centered. I do need to clean up a few of these burrs here. Okay, so I have this adhesive craft felt. It's black felt and adhesive side on the back. So I'm going to mark this and cut a piece out, and we can line the back or the bottom of this with craft felt. Cut this a little bit in more. So we will try to peel off this backing paper, which is always fun, hey? And of course everything wants to move around. Alright. Yes. It's a little stiff, but I think that's what you kind of want. We have a box with a pinhole mounted in it, the makings of a shutter mechanism already made, just needs to go back in there, and it's all painted on the inside. Really, that was actually the easier part of it, because what we have to do now is to build the insert box, and I'm going to be using this kind of light colored thin cardboard for that, and some gaffer's tape, maybe some hot glue, I don't know, but so this box has to fit in here. It has to be able to be removable in a changing bag so that I can change out the paper. So it has to fit tight enough to be light tight, but it can't be so tight that it doesn't come out very easy. And then it has to sit the paper about 2 inches above the pinhole. And so it's going to be an interesting little design. Also, the paper is going to be 5 inches square, but the overall box internal dimensions are a little over 6. So there's going to be some little spacers in there so that when you slip the paper in the little thing, it's going to be centered properly. So all that has to be figured out, and that's going to be the fun of it. Well, okay, so I have the 3 spacers glued down, clamped with some clothespins. I've spaced them apart just about a 1/16 of an inch wider than 5 inches so that there's room for the 5-inch paper to go in there. You don't want it exactly 5 inches, otherwise it'll bind up, it won't go in there. So a little bit extra room, hopefully that'll be enough. Okay, so now this is the rear wall of the film slot, or the front wall of the storage slot, and I want to also put some spacers on it. The 2 sets of spacers will sit face to face, so there is a double thickness of cardboard in there. That should be enough room to easily get the paper in and out without it binding and not being too loose. This is our cardboard insert. I had to trim it down somewhat in order for it to fit in the box with the glue fillets on the corners, and you have to account for the tape and the width of these corners. It's kind of not real scientific, actually. Let me get a piece of cardboard here. And so this is the slot right here where the paper will go in. This is the hole that faces toward the front, the pinhole. And this is the storage slot in the back, and this goes like this. So the open side of the box goes where the shutter is, but that basically goes down in there like that and enables the lid to close all the way and the snap to close. So I'm using a plate of wood that has a 1/4-20 blind nut tripod mount, some cup hooks, and I can just set these various box cameras on it and use bungee cords. That's kind of a universal way of mounting these pinhole cameras to tripods. What we're going to do here is we're going to have to calculate our exposure time. Okay, so our focal length is roughly 50 millimeters. That's near the middle of the field of view. Of course, out toward the edge it's a lot further. We'll just say 50 for now. And 1/3 of a millimeter pinhole makes about an F150. F90 reads about 4 seconds. So what I'm going to do is calculate what it would be if it was F150 instead of F90. And in order to do that, I need a calculator, which is in my little notebook. And the way this calculation works is you take the F150, divide it by the 90, you square the results, and then you multiply it by the exposure time at F90, which is times 4 seconds, and that's about 11 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and do that, do a 11-second exposure. I'm going to verify my meter reading one more time. F90 for 4 seconds. Yep, ISO 12, F90, 4 seconds. Okay, so 11 seconds, so I'm going to try to be the subject matter of the picture. I'm going to probably try to get down here at eye level, or maybe like this or something, I don't know. So 11 seconds, so I'm going to wait on it, and wait till the minute hand gets to the, all right. All right, so there was my 11-second exposure. I have a second paper negative stored in the storage compartment, but I'm going to go ahead and develop this one and see what we get. I have to use my 8x10 size trays because those 5-inch square negatives are a little too big to go into the smaller trays. So I'm using these 3-drawer stacks. I have developer, stop, bath, fixer. I have rinse, rinse, rinse. So I go from developer to rinse, stop to rinse, fix to rinse. It helps to preserve the chemistry, the life of the stop bath and the fixer, to have a water rinse between them. So that's what I do. Some tongs, and we're ready to take the paper out of the camera and go for it. All right. Let's see what this looks like in the fixer. Well, that's pretty interesting. I definitely centered it pretty well, it looks like. It's a little close to the left edge, but the other 3 are good. And it looks like my grayscale, the medium gray on my face, is probably okay. The other negative already loaded into the film plane on the camera, so we're ready to go on this one. Take my watch off so I can refer to it a little bit better. Okay, well, let's see what happens. Did I pull the shutter rod far enough up? Is it overexposed? Is it underexposed? Well, we just won't know these things until we develop it. Let's take it in and develop it, shall we? It's actually pretty cool. You can actually see the GoPro camera right back here. That's neat. Looks like I got some good grayscale on my face. Well, that was a fun job. It took hours to build this camera, but in the end, you know, it works good. It comes out easy. The little cardboard insert, it works fine. I can put the 5-inch square paper negatives in here just like that, and goes just like that. Closes up fine. Latches, the shutter pulls, everything works good, and no light leaks. Hey, great. Well, I like doing these kind of projects. I like taking things like these cigar boxes that are, you know, built fairly well considering they're kind of throwaway items. Not an ideal size for this. You know, ideally we could have had a smaller box if we were making our own box. But anyways, the resulting images are okay. I like them. I think our pinhole is adequately sharp. Let's start with the first one where I'm standing up in front of the man cave shed. You can see my, would be my right arm, left arm in the picture. Looks transparent. You can see the door behind it. So there's kind of a ghosty effect there, and that's because, of course, I moved partway through the exposure, and that's pretty cool. I like the round image. That circular image is very interesting. And then this second one, unfortunately, my paper trimmer, when I was trimming these, it scratched the negative here, but anyhow, it's pretty interesting. I think my face was overexposed, and so if I did this again, I would probably sit in the final position and meter right on my face to make sure that I didn't get it overexposed. So yeah, the negative is really dark, and of course the positive is pretty much blown out white, but really interesting pictures, and I really do like the round format. What can you say? It's very unique. So now, if you had to make a silver gelatin contact print of these negatives, how would you do it? Well, I thought about that. If you want the white border around the circular image to be white, then what you have to do is make a mask. So an example would be, let's say I'm contact printing this circular image onto an 8x10 sheet of paper. I'm going to get an 8x10 mask with the same size 4 3/4 inch hole in the middle. So I would lay my 8x10 photo paper, my print paper, face up. I would place this paper negative face down in the middle of it, and then I would put the mask on top of it to mask off the rest of the area outside the circle, and then maybe a plate of glass on top of that to keep it nice and tightly pressed, and then do your contact exposure. And that way all your border area doesn't get any exposure. It stays paper white in the finished print. And I think that's probably the best way to do it if you're doing a silver gelatin print. So there you go. circular image format pinhole camera made from cigar box. I think I paid a couple dollars for this at the cigar store. A little cardboard gaffer's tape kind of insert that has a storage compartment for, I'm guessing, at least 20 sheets of paper you could fit in that half-inch wide slot there. And it goes in nicely, it closes, no light leaks. It works. Well, this is Joe Van Cleve. I just want to encourage you guys that you can do this. You can make these little pinhole cameras with some simple tools, mat knives, cardboard cutting tools, glue, gaffer's tape, those kind of things. It's fun. It's a good way to pass a day, and I hope you guys consider doing some pinhole photography, making your own cameras, and I really like these circular images. I'm going to have to play with this some more. Well, until next time, you guys stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.